two questions. First for Mike, is it true that you're the first astronaut to ever tweet in space?
It's a bit controversial. Yes, I was the first, when NASA, it wasn't my idea, when Twitter, I guess it was back in, we're going back, like April of 2009 or so, about a month or so before, yeah, it's over 2 years ago, when Twitter started, I guess it was popular at that point already, the NASA public affairs folks had the idea that they wanted someone to, is there something wrong? Okay, all right, I guess I'll answer the question. They wanted me to, they wanted a guinea pig to try this Twitter thing. So they asked me to do it. I said, yeah, I'd love to. And so I was able to Twitter during my training. And once we got to space, the way we worked it was, I wrote my tweets in the form of an email, and then I would send them down. I would send them, and they would be downlinked. Every 12 hours or so, right? We have a morning and we have an evening mail sync. So they would be sent down to the public affairs group, and then they would then put those out on my Twitter site. So whenever I would think of something, if I was near the computer, I would just type it in and send it, and then it would be kind of in a bulk email would be included. All these would be lined up, however many, 5 or 10, however many I did, or 2, whatever it was, depending on how busy I was, and then it would go out on my Twitter site. So that's the way I did it. Now, usually in groups like this, where there's a lot of computer people start complaining and screaming, not really, but it's, oh, your nose is really, really tweeting. So I think the first astronaut to actually send a tweet and it went, that was TJ Kramer. So he was the first one to do instantaneous Twitter. When I did it, it was, it was kind of held in a buffer and then came back. Depends on your point of view.
Fair enough. And for Wheels, do you ever dream space?
Yes, do I ever dream about space? I still dream about space. It's amazing. Actually, physically, when you first get back, after spending 6 months there for about a month and a half, I would have floating sensations as well. So that's why they don't let us drive for about a month when you get back. And yeah, flat over here. It's good. But I do get these sensations where I dream about space. You get the same thing?
Yeah, all the time.
It's pretty amazing. And they continue.
Before we take our next question, I understand Mike Massimino has to leave, but Doug. Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming. Enjoy it all. Thanks, Elmo.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, so we still have questions.
Okay, yeah, I'll stay here as long as you.
I guess we think of so much of space flight as being going through a checklist. Push button A, pull letter B. Can you talk about a moment when you had to go off those checklists and that improvise?
Yes, well, it's usually our science on the space station is pretty much step by step. So those things inside. Now, things outside when we're doing spacewalks. Liquid sunshine. And in the Army we say, if it ain't raining, it ain't training. So the things outside, when we're in the direct sunlight outside on a spacewalk, the temperature in the sun, like I'm in these lights here, just facing the sun, the temperatures get to be about 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And so your suit is working hard to keep you cool. And then when the sun goes down, because we're orbiting the Earth once every 90 minutes, every 45 minutes we get a sunrise or a sunset. And so, and then in the eclipse, on the backside of here, the temperatures plummet to like 300 degrees below zero. So you have a 500-600 degree temperature shift. And so when you have mechanical things outside, collars, locking mechanisms that are made out of metals, they don't behave quite properly. So we go off checklist quite a bit when we're outside. Just making, again, this is where that problem solving skill comes in. Now inside of the shuttle, you'll hear very, very sort of rote memory, step-by-step checklist procedures. And that's very, very important for this vehicle that you watch tomorrow. So kind of a mix of the two. And you actually, over time, you internalize these steps as well. That's the hardest thing. You can read like exactly what you're saying. saying, take switch B to on, and that's fine, and that's easy to do, but when I was first learning to fly in the shuttle, I thought, okay, when I throw this switch, what is happening? I want to know what's happening. So if I throw that switch and something bad happens, should I immediately throw that switch off, or could I know what systems it's cascading into? It's sort of a rote memorization and internalization of your checklist as well. So kind of a mix of the two.
A question on your right over here.
Hey, Wheels, thank you for being here. My name is Brent Stanley. Here on Earth, we get to experience fantastic atmospheric phenomena like sunrises and sunsets. I'm curious what kind of phenomena you see in orbit or just features on the Earth, and maybe if you could describe what a sunset or sunrise looks in orbit.
It's absolutely breathtaking. In fact, when you're outside, it's even more dramatic because you're kind of looking through a fishbowl, and so the sights outside are pretty incredible. And I remember my first spacewalk. You can see this very same thing from the cupola now. The cupola has afforded us sort of oblique views of the Earth now, where in most of the windows in the space station, the window in the U.S. laboratory and the windows in the Russian service module are all facing natives, or towards the Earth. And so we do have a couple of windows that face out to the sides, but the cupola now, with these 7 windows, has given us the ability to look obliquely at the Earth. So now we can actually take photographs of what we're seeing with our eyes, and you can see the celestial activity as well. And the most amazing thing to me, when I was out on my first spacewalk, I was so distracted by the Earth, because when you look up into deep space, it's so dark and so vast. It's really pretty frightening when you're out there. I remember I was on the the robotic arm, and Apollo Nestle was flying me around, and I had this big antenna, and I was flying down into the payload bay of the shuttle to put this thing away, and I was facing towards deep space, and so Earth and the station and the shuttle are all behind me, and I'm holding this big antenna. And oh, by the way, you're in this foot restraint, but you're floating in your suit, so you can't actually feel your feet on the soles of your boots, and so you're kind of floating there. So and looking off into deep space, it's pretty frightening. I kept kicking my heels out to make sure I was still in there, because we have a tether that we put on there, usually with a safety tether. But when I looked at the Earth in the backdrop, the outside of the space station and the shuttle, it's all white, black, shades of gray, and metallic colors, so it's pretty sterile looking. And then you look at the Earth, and it's like an explosion of color. It is so disturbing, that it creates, you're orbiting so fast that there's a lot of motion there. You see the effect of wind, you see the effect of currents and things, and so you can see all that on the planet. And I remember when I was doing my work on the top of the truss, and I was looking down at the Earth as I had the circles going around my eyes. It's like, holy cow, I can't believe I'm out here, And I couldn't wait for the sun to go down, so get into eclipse, so I wouldn't be distracted by the Earth. And so Paulo called. He said, "Hey, 2 minutes to sunset." So I was thinking, "Oh, thank the Lord, I can now concentrate on my work." So I turned my helmet lights on. The sun went down, and so now I've got my little workspace here, and all was right with the world. And I saw a flash out of the corner of my eye, And now I'm looking at the Earth, and I see these puffs of lightning, and then like fingers of like Mesozoic lightning stretching over hundreds of miles. And then the aurora kind of coming in and circling the pole and coming back out like paint strokes, all right before your eyes. And I'm thinking like, I can't wait for the sun to come up, So it's so incredibly distracting when you're outside trying to work, but so awe-inspiring when you're looking at it through the windows of the cupola. That I tried to tweak that. I think I told you guys a couple times, man, I wish you could see this with your own eyes, because when I take this picture, it's really not what it looks like. It looks it's 100 times better than that. But especially the aurora, because you can see it moving. It's pretty fantastic. And I tweeted one photo. One of my favorites was we were over it was the Southern Lights. We were over the Southern Indian Ocean, and the aurora. It looked like we were inside of the aurora, because the green was. The bottom of the space station was actually glowing like a greenish color from the aurora, and you can see like fingers coming out underneath of us, and it was fantastic. So
Thank you very
I don't
much.
know if I answered your question, but it's amazing.
Yeah, that's what I
But
wanted
this is
to
what I
hear.
dream about as well.
We got a question over here on your left.
Hi Doug. We often hear how the ride up to space is loud and shaky, crazy. What is re-entry like? What does it feel like? Does the noise start? Can you actually see anything outside of the shuttle?
Yeah, that's very good question. Now that I explained a little bit about the ride home in the shuttle, is pretty tame, really. It's you get a little bit of lateral vibration, and we came in. We were the first 120. We were Discovery. We were the first descending node landing after Columbia. Remember, Columbia was on a descending node as well, and for several missions after that, they were bringing. And in fact, we try to bring people up. It takes like less energy to come up through over the Pacific and over to Central America. So we were coming down over the continental U.S. We actually entered U.S. airspace right about Seattle, and so I remember we were still probably at the very top of the part of the atmosphere. Now you're falling towards the Earth. You do your deorbit burn, and now you have the same speed because you don't have any drag yet. So now you're falling towards the Earth, and you're still at Mach 25, and now the Earth is getting much bigger, and so your sensation of speed is really, really dramatic. And we did our first banking turn, and you can see, of course, the ionization of the air is kind of engulfing you, so you feel like you're in like inside of a furnace. But it flashes outside the window, flashes of orange and some green colors, and as you're coming back in, and then as you make your banking turns, your braking turns, there's a little bit of a lateral shuffle in the shuttle. Very, very smooth though. And I remember we made our first turn. It's like, hey, there's Seattle, you know. And then 19 minutes later, we're landing here at Kennedy, so it's pretty amazing. That's called the speed of heat, by the way. So, but coming back in the Soyuz, much different. Okay, I was trying to get ready to. Is Sidney MacArthur still here? Sidney, are you here? Okay, Sidney MacArthur's husband, Bill MacArthur, was the commander of ISS 12, and Bill was giving me tips on when I was getting ready to ride the Soyuz home. I was sending emails to these guys that had ridden the Soyuz before, and I said, hey, what's it like? What things can I do to prepare? You know, and I got a note back from Jeff Williams that had 2 words on it: hang on. You know, and then I was like, well, I was already going to do that, so maybe so. Bill had described it as a series of loud explosions followed by a really bad car crash, and that's pretty much what it was. So coming back in that Soyuz was amazing. I mean, it was way more intense than what I had ready for. So it was indeed a series of loud explosions followed by a really bad car crash, and in between there's lots of twisting and turning and being deconditioned for 6 months in the absence of gravity, and then feeling all this acceleration in different axes was quite an amazing ride home. The shuttle was much smoother.
Those explosions, I think, are good sound, right? You have time for